Balthazar Gracian once said, "What's good, if short, is twice good." So I will try in this recording to keep my idea succinct and to the point. But part of the reason I'm making this as an audio message instead of posting on Substack in my normal aphoristic style is that these ideas that I intend to communicate are a little longer, a little more complex. And I think I will, though, put another aphorism over there from this recording, which is that something to the effect of, if you can't write any of your ideas as aphorisms, your mind is too analytical. But if you can write all of your ideas as aphorisms, your mind is too poetical. So here's one of my less poetical ideas, or I think there's maybe two or three that are going to be in this recording. We're going to start this ball of yarn of ideas with a tug at the stomach, which is kind of not surprisingly in the East considered like the center of chi, right? The core of human magic. And it doesn't take a lot of meditation to perceive that. I guess this idea got started with my sister. She had a stomach bug recently, and she was marveling to me how, you know, we eat food every day that's complicated, lots of ingredients. You put pizza in your body, and the stomach doesn't bat an eye. But then a rogue virus or bacteria gets in and starts replicating, and immediately the stomach completely shuts the whole thing down, shuts down the operation, total lockdown, expellation, regurgitation, sometimes both ends, just detection and taking care of business, right? And that is amazing. But that's just like a part of the wonder of the stomach, because it also powers the human organism for like 100 years. It's like our own little fusion reactor we have inside us. And again, we just shovel shit in the top, right? Prehistoric humans were picking up quail eggs off the ground, fungus. We throw a mushroom in there, some bark, a few tubers, dirt on them still. Flesh, hair, we just catch a rabbit and eat it. Catch a fish, eat some fish scales. Stomach just takes it all in, sorts it out, turns it into energy, and repairs our body with the excess materials for 100 years. If you had a toy like that, if you bought in some Gold Doll story, you get this mysterious magazine in your mailbox, and it advertised this robot, and you get this little robot toy. It's got lights and gizmos and moves around, but there's no battery, there's no charger, and so you contact the 1-800 number. Your little James is like, "What do I do? How do I power it?" And the guy on the line says, "Oh, just put stuff in the top. You just open it up and you put something in." And he's like, "Well, what do I put in? Double A, triple A?" He's like, "No, it don't matter. Just put anything in." And he's like, "And it'll just run?" "Yeah, it'll run." "For how long?" "For 100 years." So he tries anything, goes in. He says, "Well, what if I put something wrong in there?" "That's okay. You put something wrong in, it'll tell you. It'll put it back out and just put something else in. But it can pretty much use whatever." Like, that's the level we're talking. That's the magical young adult or even kids story, Harry Potter, Charlie Bone. Yes, was that the Charlie Bone? Is that a series? It's like it's fantastical, but it's real, and that's what the stomach does. And then you combine that, right, the powering, the repairing with the threat detection, and everything. And you say, well, how do we have this? Okay, so that's like a little bit of a meditative start, right? But where's this idea going? Is that, well, what is this? The idea of science, right? And what I would say is a relatively convincing ism, which is evolutionism, is this magic robot was designed by random chance and death. By completely random edits and a nearly unfathomable amount of death. And through those two tools, we were able to arrive at such a complicated, sophisticated, physical marvel to the point of magic, right? To a science so advanced it seems like magic. And that's evolution, right? That's the theory. That's how it's a powerful idea. It's a very powerful ism. And I think the best way to think of isms is like people. They're like demons, right? Persons. And they're, or as the Thomas Aquinas, and Thomas Aquinas said, they're thinking thoughts, because it's a idea, it's a thought, but once you have it, it shapes the way you see other things. It shapes the rest of your thoughts. And so on some level, it is as though the thought itself is thinking. It's like communism, right? Which says everything is a battle between, you know, the different, the workers and the elites, right? The bourgeoisie. It's a class struggle, and everything is class struggle, and it explains everything, and it's a way of looking at everything, and everything you encounter can be seen as that conflict. And because once that gets in, right, that shapes the tincture of your thoughts. That thought begins thinking. And that's where you almost become possessed, right? You become possessed with Marxism or Darwinism. Darwinianism. Darwinism? Darwinian. Darwinism. So that's why the ism is like a demon. But it's also, like I said, it's like a person, because obviously spirits are persons, like the Holy Spirit, right? The Spirit. But they're like a person because, and here my other sister is going to spawn some ideas, because she gave me this work published by the University of Mount St. Mary. So I would quote the author. I don't actually know who the author is. I think it was just from the university. And it was about evangelization, and I think it was something that maybe like all of their freshmen have to read. But it had, you know, in the topic it was discussing, it had a topic which expands beyond it, and it was saying how, you know, you have to understand the world you're living in if you want to evangelize, if you want to reach people. And there was a time in the early days of the Catholic faith where everyone was pagan. And so on some level, Christianity was a novel thing. It was a new thing. It was a minority thing. And so there were advantages and disadvantages with regard to evangelization in that, because, you know, you suddenly appear like a new way of living, right? That's an exciting way of living, a dangerous way of living. And there's, you know, ups and downs to that. But in a Christendom society, it's different, because everyone's bored with Christianity, right? Or used to it. It's the norm. And so evangelization looks very different. It looks more like resisting lukewarmness, or resisting backsliding, or something like that. But it's not going to appear novel. It's going to appear like the boring old thing. And it hinted that we live in a society which is neither of those now, right? It's neither Christendom nor a pagan society. It's a post-Christendom society. It's an apostate society. And what whatever the tools for evangelization in that society are, as it were. But not the topic I'm talking about, which is that I bring this up because it was saying in the work that one thing you have to understand about evangelization is that you are offering to people, or you should be, an entire way of looking at the world. You're not offering them one idea, and you're not challenging one idea. You're giving them a package of ideas, right? And you're asking that a conversion is a rejection of a package of ideas for a new package of ideas. It's saying you can't just say, oh, I'm going to drop this one thing and then pick up this one Christian idea, because everything interconnects. And more or less, large worldviews have been flushed out, right? Either someone lives and basically has none, and their worldview is just don't think about it, or they have a relatively flushed out worldview, and it's going to be stretching into basically every area of their life. And this is why personhood is so impactful in evangelization. Because when you encounter a person, they communicate to you a whole manner of living, a whole way of looking at the world. You don't just meet one person who has one idea. They have a whole life which is functioning. And so it may be easier to adopt ideas through a personal encounter than it is through an ideological encounter or a theoretical encounter. And this is the way isms are. When you encounter an ism, it gives you the whole package, right? And in this way, it's like encountering a person. It says, Darwinism says, I will give you a way of looking at everything. The way your dating life is, the way the government is structured, the way why you like eating raspberries more than blueberries. I will give you an explanation for everything. And that's like meeting a person who can answer your question. You have a question, you ask them, they give you an answer. Maybe they're right, maybe they're wrong, but they have an answer. So and it may be, ism is a English thing, so it may not be that everything that has ISM at the end is actually one of these, but there are major idea forces, which even I would say self-recognize as something bigger, something alive. One of the most striking things to me about the Communist Manifesto is how it believes, or how it begins with the statement, a spirit is sweeping across Europe, this spirit or specter of communism, right? So it's a ghost. It's saying there's a ghost. It's saying there's a spirit, there's a haunting. Or maybe it even says, I don't know, it's a translation, the specter is haunting Europe, the specter of communism. And I would say Darwinism is the same. Okay, so we're keeping it succinct. We got the power of the stomach, the magic, how it's explained by Darwinism, how isms are persons and spirits, right? They're like spirits. They're like spirits because they're thinking thoughts, ideas which affect other ideas or grand ideas, something like 4K strategy ideas. As well as that they have the qualities, or many of the qualities of personhood. And now I'm going to wrap up with this last idea, which is that the power the neurological, maybe we should say brain rewriting power of being around persons, being around people. Okay, so Schopenhauer talks about how when you're listening to someone talk, or you're reading a book, actually I think is where he says it. He says it's like getting caught into a river of thought. And they say, okay, follow me for a while. I'm going to make an argument. And you're like, okay. And so then they say, well, now think this, okay? Now think that, okay? Now, wouldn't you conclude this, therefore? Okay. And this is the way like most of the Platonic dialogues are, right? But what's happening is they are grabbing you and saying, think with me, grabbing you by the hand. Your brain isn't doing this on its own. Maybe it can't. But here, hold my hand and I will take you there, right? I will guide your brain through the neural pathways of these thoughts. And, I don't really know much about neuroscience, but I know at least there's just this general idea that when the neural pathways become strengthened, and when they become strengthened, you can kind of get caught in thought loops. So we might say this is a way of breaking out of thought loops or getting introduced to new thought loops, or just in general, on a sort of a symbolic way of developing new neural pathways, new manners of thinking, is by someone guiding you. Sure. A lot of people don't have the attention span, or or the will to be guided by someone through a process of thought. I think this is often why you see in debates, political debates, sometimes a very premature refusal to follow a train of thought. Someone will say, well, okay, we're disagreeing on this big thing, but what about this? What about this little issue? And you'll have a candidate or someone or an interlocutor just refuse to answer. No, I'm not going to answer your question. And you're like, what, you can't answer that question? That question is so far distant, right? Or they'll answer in a bizarre way, or somehow shift things. Let me try and think about it real quick. It was like if they're discussing about whether, transgender should be allowed to use the restroom or whatever, and then someone says, well, okay, let's rewind. Do you think there's any differences between men and women biologically? And if someone refuses to answer that, you have to say, well, what's going on here? And what I think is usually what's going on is they know how this neural pathway, this river flow that Schopenhauer talks about, they know how it goes, and they're saying, no, you're not going to take me, don't touch my hand, right? They swat, don't touch my hand. I'm not going down your river. I know where you think the river goes. I know where your river goes, so I'm not even going to start. I don't want those neural pathways strengthened. And whether this is because they're afraid of getting caught in them, or they just find them emotionally distasteful. They find the little lazy river to be unpleasant to drift along. They'll refuse. So what about that then? What does this have to do with presence? Well, because presence of a person is a way of developing the neural pathways of a worldview. Because to get to know someone, to spend time in their presence, or as you get to know someone and spend time in their presence, you begin to understand how they think. And the brain does this ambient reconnaissance awareness thing where, let's say you're in a group of people and one of them is like a psychotic, psychopath, rapist, narcissist, whatever. You have to sit, and then you have your little sister there, right? You have to immediately be thinking you start to think as you see him angling to try and get your sister in the other room, or when your sister goes to the drinking fountain and he follows her out there, you have to notice right away, or you do notice right away, because you're in his brain. You're thinking, I know what he wants, I know how he thinks, I know how he moves. And There's just a really tragic story. I'm not even going to go into it, but basically, like kidnapper with a FedEx truck. It's like, if you knew this guy, if you knew a guy was like a kidnapper, right, and no one else in the group did, but then he's like asking questions about the lock on the FedEx truck, you're going to be thinking, what's up with that, man? Are you planning on kidnapping someone again? Why are you so interested in whether the door locked from the inside or the outside? But what just happened is you got in his brain. Or maybe you could say he got in yours. But you you were forced, because he was in your presence, to follow the neural pathways of a psychotic kidnapper. You have to, because your evolutionary impulse is to keep tabs on people and to understand your environment and to be aware of your threats and your dangers. And the only way to do that is to know how they're thinking. And this goes for, I give up those examples because they're distasteful, right? They're uncomfortable. But it goes for good people too, right? To understand good people, you hang around them, and then you see something. You're chatting with your group of friends, and suddenly a clown bursts through the door, and he's got bubbles, and it's a bizarre thing. He's in the wrong room because he's going to some child's birthday party, and he thought it was this hotel room, but it's the other hotel room. You're going to be thinking or understanding how your friends are perceiving the situation, how they are laughing or they're not laughing, or how they think it's like something else, or just the irony, or maybe you have a communist, maybe you're with a Marxist, and he's thinking how ludicrous and humiliating it must be for that poor wage slave, minimum wage worker having to dress like a clown and then get in a humiliating circumstance because the bourgeois hotel denizen didn't tell him the right room number or whatever, right? But you're in their brains. You have to be thinking what they're thinking, or you do. You just will when you're around people. And these strengthen your neural pathways, whether you want them to or not. So that's basically my idea. You could kind of probably draw more conclusions from that. I could milk that for more time, but I'm not going to. But I will say there's another, I mentioned that Gratian quote at the beginning. There's another quote that comes to my mind very often. It's from the Bible. Maybe Proverbs, maybe Sirach, I'm not sure. But it says, "He who touches pitch blackens the hand, and he who associates with sinners learns his ways." And I think that the fact that it says associates with is significant, because it doesn't say befriend. Associate with almost just means to be around, right? You have to somehow connect with them. But it also doesn't say becomes like them. It says learns his ways. You learn their patterns of thinking. I spent some time at a transitional house for juvenile delinquents, and you better believe I learned how they thought. I learned what things that if there's something shiny, they're immediately thinking about when you leave the room, how they're going to get it into their hand, and then their pocket, and then their shoe, and walk out with it, right? And now that sticks with me. Now I know the way they think, but in some sense, on some semi-subconscious level, I am thinking that way. When I am thinking about how they think, I myself am thinking it. Just not through maybe my direct conscious intellect. It's sort of my subconscious intellect. But whatever those neural pathways now are, simply by being around them, simply by being in the presence, I start to resonate, or to whatever it is that the Philip does. It's like shadow or reflect. But in a more, I'm trying to say a word, I just don't know what the word is, like in a physical way, a physical reflection. It's like a reflection in actual sculpture or something. It starts to be, my brain starts to be shaped like theirs, something like that, both good and bad. So that's the significance of presence, and combine those two ideas, right? The isms, the presence, and the formative aspect of presence. And I think we'll see where that's all going.